some of the patterns are biochemical in nature. They're in the neurology. It happens even before you think you want to do something. Like, when a guy who is alcoholic, if he says, tomorrow I won't drink, it's not his choice. He can't. It's not within his control. The next day he's a different beast. The biochemicals are different. Let me ask you something. If I were to drug somebody in the room, okay, with an injection, what are the chances they will behave the same way as their normal stuff? We all agree that no, once they're drugged, they're going to have, their behavior is going to be different based on the characteristics of the drug. Your body is a drug machine. It is producing drugs all the time. It's producing the drugs for anger, for wanting to smoke or wanting to be anxious. It's not a mental thing, but it's more biochemical. It is creating that all the time. So a transformation has to also happen at the biochemical level, where it can, in the same situation, produce a different chemical response. And people naturally, they don't need a counselor or a coach to tell them the insights. When they have a different biochemical and they're naturally different in the same situation, they naturally come up with a different insight. And that is, to me, the beauty of working it the other way. Transformation first, and then in retrospect, connecting the dots and seeing the insights. The purpose of conscious insights is you can do more of it again and again and again after you've had the transformation. And this is the problem if someone's had some basic NLP training. They tend to bucket people into, I'm a visual person, auditory person, or a kinesthetic person. But we have to understand that, so where that comes from is that, see, first of all, we all have all the five senses, right? It's part of our neurology. But some people, at some situation, pay more attention to the way someone looks. Like, oh, he's not looking into the eyes, he's not telling the truth. Or he's looking deep into the eyes, he's telling the truth. Their attention is on the physical, on the visual input. Some people could pay minute attention to tonal differences. Oh, there was a little bit of a shiver in the voice, he's not telling the truth. Or he's a little careful. You understand what I'm saying? And some people would pay attention to the words that are said more than the mode in which it was said. And some people wouldn't pay attention to anything they're hearing, they would not pay attention to how they feel at that point in time. But they are processing using all the channels: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, and olfactory. The smell, the taste, they're processing. In fact, people process using smell more often than, most times when we say we feel the vibe of a person, you're actually getting input from all five channels. And neuroscience is proving that more and more these days. So they did this one experiment, I think in Harvard. What they did is, they were doing an experiment on how much time does it take for a person to bucket another person into a particular category. So when you meet somebody, in a fraction of a second, you're unconsciously judging whether you can trust them and how much authority do they have in what they are going to present. Authority as an expertise. Now, apparently, that process happens in about 1/20th of a second. Okay, so we're always bucketing people, whether we want it or not. We have to. That's how we learn. That's how we know who to trust. But the thing is, the interesting thing is, it takes about 1/4th of a second for the visual information to get processed in the neurocortex. Which is faster, 1/4th, 1/20th? So how is it that if it takes 1/4th of a second for the visual cortex to process, we are able to process people in 1/20th of a second? Other senses. You can sense what you call the heat dissipation around them much faster. You can get smell. It doesn't go through a transformation. Smell is one of the senses where it doesn't pass through a filter. It hits the neurocortex straight. So you processing, as a human, unconsciously, you're processing information in all the senses all the time. But you will become conscious of that person in one sense most of the time. Because conscious bandwidth is limited compared to unconscious bandwidth. So unconsciously, you're processing the vibe of the person from the smell, from the heat dissipation around them, from the way they move, from their skin color shifts as they talk, from the fluctuations in the voice, from the choice of words, and a variety of other things. But for each person, they will become aware of that in one sense. So the NLP representation system is actually a tool for knowing what sense is a person more aware of in that moment. And it is a tool for not basketing people, your visual, auditory. It's a tool for rapport building. If you can join and communicate to that person in the same representation that they're consciously aware of, then you tend to have more rapport with that person. They can understand you easier. If they're visually looking at things and you visually explain it to them, they understand it more easier. But it's not a tool for bucketing as to someone is auditory, visual, or something. In fact, every artist, specifically singers, as well as other artists, the art itself comes from a function called as cross-mapping. Or the technical term for that is called synesthesia. What that means neurologically is that one channel that's coming as input is represented in another channel at the same time. So you hear a particular sound, it makes you feel a particular way. Not in sequence. Not sound comes, then you think, and then you feel. The sound and the feeling happen together. Some musicians can hear a particular sound and they'll see a particular color. Some artists can see a color and have a sound. Some artists can see a particular color and there's a particular feeling that happens. When that cross-mapping happens, there's a region in the brain called gyrus angular that needs to be highly active for synesthesia or cross-mapping to happen. That is the region in the brain that leads to learning. You remember we spoke about generalization yesterday? I briefly mentioned it. Generalization is the ability to take something that you learn in one area and apply it to another area. And when cross-mapping is happening, when synesthesia is happening, when metaphors are happening, you remember I said that when someone does cross integration, they see green and yellow or some colors come together. For me, that's all evidence that the gyrus angular has become active enough at that moment to do cross-mapping. So it doesn't matter you see mountains, valleys, colors, lights, spaceships. What matters is that you're seeing something that is representing what's going on in another representation. And when that happens, it means cross-mapping is happening. And cross-mapping is one of the genius traits that we work to building for people through the membership journey. In fact, a lot of stuff that we do in Supermasters in Thailand is to develop cross-mapping to the point it not only becomes active when you're going through music and painting, but it's active when you're thinking about business. It's active when you're thinking about the family situations. Because when you have cross-mapping enabled, the kind of solutions that you come from is going to be so much more innovative than if you were to just process them through one part of your brain. Cross-mapping allows you to take learning you have from other things. Maybe somebody is good here in geometry. Imagine if your abilities in geometry can become the foundation for the solutions you come up with in your family challenges. That's what cross-mapping is about. It's about detecting patterns from different areas of expertise and seeing if that pattern has a practical application in your current situation. And for most geniuses, this ability happens all the time. That's why when Newton discovered gravity, he was able to say an apple fell down and he was thinking, how did it fall down? And that's why Einstein, in between physics classes, when he's lecturing physics, he would stop. Whenever he felt his audience couldn't learn, he would stop and he would play the violin for them and he would get them to join him in appreciating the music so that they can now go back to physics from a state where cross-mapping is enhanced. Now that is a technique, but what I would like for most of you to happen is cross-mapping to become a capability, which means you don't need to pause and play music, but when you do what you do, cross-mapping is enabled by default. And that's one of the genius traits that I think you will develop in this journey over the next few years if you haven't already. And I think there are the different levels and degrees of that capability. You could have some developed now, and then as you keep iterating on some of it, the abilities continue to develop further. So going back to that NLP model of, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, the thing that happens is sometimes For the conscious rapport, you want to understand in which rep system the person is coming from. For example, let's say you meet a couple and the couple complains saying that the wife says, I've been waiting the entire day, kept the room tidy and organized and everything prepared and put in place to show how much I love him. And then he says, I come home in the evening, and then I'm trying to have a conversation with her, but she won't even sit next to me. Now tell me, in which two rep systems are they both conscious? What is the conscious preferred rep system for both of them at that moment? Wife is at that moment visually processing the world, and the husband at that moment is processing kinesthetically. Sit close to me. Okay, so now, if you want to talk to the husband about not throwing the socks around, then you talk to him in his rep system, which is kinesthetic. Okay, and then you don't want to leave him crippled. You don't want to talk in kinesthetic and leave it there. You want to talk to him in kinesthetic and move it to visual. Okay, so there's some forms of education where they teach children exactly how the child learns. What's wrong with that? The world doesn't function like that after they graduate. So you're leaving the child crippled. But what is better is you teach the child exactly how they learn and then teach them also to learn it in other ways. So for the husband, maybe the wife or someone could say, imagine if there were worms crawling all over your skin. How would it feel? And if he says, yuck, then you say, that's the way she feels when she sees you throwing around the socks around the house. Okay, you see the bridge between feel, see. Now you tell the wife, what would it be like if you were in a desert standing all alone and you see around and there's nobody around you? How does that look? That's how he sees it when he feels that you're not next to him. Okay, so the purpose for finding representation system is to build conscious rapport in a way that you can structure your communication in a way that is acceptable and understandable by them. But it is not to bucket a person into I'm a visual, auditory, or a kinesthetic person. So one of the things that to me that the challenges with coaching specifically is we spoke about transformation first and then insight. It baffles me how the best of the coaches in the world had a raw experience in life in a particular field or in transformation. If you take the people who made coaching famous, coaching originated in the sports industry. So they know the raw feeling it requires, the raw connect and calibration. So, you take a sports person and you make that person a coach for another sports person, their calibration is spot on. They can detect before the player goes into the field, is he nervous or not? For the rest of the world, the player looks confident, but the coach will tell you that the person is nervous. They take that level of coaching, the calibration skills, and then they have a format to follow. But let's say you take that format, you give it to somebody who doesn't have that level of calibration skills. What will it do? Yeah, so those are some of the challenges of half-baked NLP concepts without the capability. And one of the things I hope to do is, how many of you here had some basic NLP training in the past? Okay, how many of you have had some basic NLP reading or something before? Yeah. So one of the things I would like you to do in this is I want to figure out all the things that you have learned about human behavior that are inadequate. See, the problem with NLP is it's a normalization. What it means is that John and Richard did something that didn't exist. They discovered patterns and procedures that didn't exist. So when people ask them, hey, what do you guys do? They didn't want to say psychology, psychotherapy, because they needed a license, and they had to come up with a name. And John's version is a police guy stopped them in the middle of the night, and he was high, and he asked him, well, what do you do? And he turned back. In the back seat, there was a computer book, there was a neurology paper, and there was a linguistic book from Noam Chomsky. So he said neuro-linguistic programming. Now, what it allowed them to do is it gave them the license and freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. But what it also did, it gave anybody in the world license to do whatever they wanted to do and call it NLP. So today I walk into a bookstore and I pick up the most popular book on NLP. It has nothing in common with what I learned from John, or for that matter, even from Richard. And I don't recognize the stuff in there, but since it's an unregulated field, anything could go past in that label called NLP. So that's the challenge, and it's very surprising. I went through, there are research papers that have proven NLP doesn't work. So I went through them. I have an academic background. I published papers in IEEE, right? So I went and saw, was the research done adequately? And I downloaded the papers, and then I saw what was the nonsense that was happening in that, is that both the papers that tried to prove does NLP work or doesn't work had nothing in specific about what specific procedure was done and what and who did it. Like, I mean, you would, as a common sense, you would know if you pick 100 people from the road and you teach them collapse anchor as a process and you ask them to do collapse anchor on someone, the chances of them being able to succeed is close to zero. Actually, a little higher than that, because I think 10% of the people will anyway get results. Yeah, have you heard of the blind? Have you heard about the double-blind study in the medical science? The reason they do double-blind study is because every medicine has to prove itself that a particular percentage of the population will anyway get cured. Can the medicine cure more number of people, more percentage of people than those who get cured naturally? So what they do is they have a double-blind study. There are X number of patients, Y number of patients. They split them into two groups. And both the patient and the doctor doesn't know who's getting medicine and who's getting water. And it's surprising, for all known diseases, from the people who get water, a certain percentage automatically get healed when they just believe that they were getting the medicine. And it's, so the people who get medicine, a more higher percentage have to get cured for it to not be a placebo effect. And so when people read books like, say, for example, I have nothing against these things, but I'm just saying, as a scientific method, if you're reading a book like The Secret, or if you're reading a book on affirmations, the fact that somebody got a result doesn't mean anything. What means is, what is the sample? How many people did it? And how many of them got result? Right? Because I can give you plain water, and out of 100, 10 people will get result. And any proper study will not omit how many other people were there in that study group. And that is one of the, I think, fundamental presuppositions with which John and Richard developed NLP, is that they needed to know that the procedure can be tweaked to get more success rate than what is conventionally otherwise possible. So in terms of representation systems, some of you are consciously more evolved in one than the other. Some of you can hear sounds in your head, some of you can't. How many of you cannot hear sounds in your head? Like you can't hear a song with all the guitar and the violin and the... Everybody can. Can you try doing this now? Can you close your eyes and remember your favorite song and hear the full song with all the instruments? How many of you can do it? How many of you can't do it? Partial. How many of you can partially do it? How many of you can't do it at all? Okay. So there was a time when I would sing like, smile, an everlasting smile. To the point I would even ask Harini, how am I singing, Harini? The fundamental capability to be on rhythm, or to hear the sound in your head and compare it with what you are doing. Without that fundamental capability, you could spend hours and hours and hours and hours of training and you wouldn't be able to learn to sing. It's just like that. In fact, my mother sent me for Hindustani class with my sister, and I thought my mother was sending me because she wanted someone to go along with my sister for her safety. Because the Hindustani teacher made me play video games while she was teaching my sister singing. So recently my mother is like, I don't know why you don't know how to sing. I send you to Hindustani. I'm like, no, you send me as bodyguard to my sister. But I think, so for me the challenge was I couldn't hear. I can hear voices. I can hear maybe a note, but I can't hear the tones, differences in tone and pitch. When in the past, I couldn't hear, if I were to remember a sound, I wouldn't hear the tune in my head. Even if I hear it, it was very faint. So it's a fundamental capability. Okay, now it doesn't mean that I don't have that circuitry in my neurology. It means that I didn't apply that circuitry at a young age for it to become a natural and innate thing. So what do? I work on it. In the same way, some of you will not be able to imagine things when you close your eyes. And some of you will not be able to feel distinctions in your physical, emotional sensations. Right? Like someone, you ask them, close your eyes and think about a time when you were excited, and they can feel all the butterflies in their stomach. For another person, they can see it clearly, but they can't bring back the feeling. So I think these are all fundamental capabilities. So the reason NLP, or John and Richard, paid attention to the distinction in representation systems is because these are what I call as most fundamental capabilities. When you work on a fundamental capability, you will find that there are other capabilities that start to develop on top of them. For example, when I started my ability to start to hear sounds in my head, it's no longer only about singing. I can, after 5 years, hear someone's voice. Exactly they said what they said, and I would know that they lie or not. So let me give you an example. Someone lies to me today. I don't know if they're lying or not. Why? Because for you to know if they're lying or not, you need to calibrate. And this is another thing that NLP twisted altogether, you know. John and Richard, specifically John, said calibration is the mother of all skills. And, you know, some trainers in the NLP world said, I would like to keep things simple. So observation is the mother of all skills. What's the difference between observation and calibration? Having a base reference that you're absolutely sure of before you conclude the meaning of your observation. That's calibration. So let me give you an example. Someone is coming home, let's say tired. Okay, so you see someone in workplace, they're tired, they're staggering. Is it it's an accurate observation for you to say their steps are staggering and that person is tired? But are they drunk? Are they on drugs? Or are they staggering because they didn't sleep for 2 days fully? You don't know that yet. And you won't be able to come to that conclusion until you have a reference of when this person is drunk, how do they stagger? When they are on drugs, how do they stagger? Or when they're tired, how do they stagger? Okay, so for example, you know, the most common thing is that they say if someone is not looking into your eyes, they're lying. Or if they are in a high pitch, they are lying. Or if they're folded arms, they're trying to block something. But what does it mean if someone is having their arms crossed? It means they're having their arms crossed, period. Unless you have a reference of, with absolute certainty, what it had meant in the past. Okay, so let's say someone is talking to me and they go on a high pitch. I make a note of it. I don't know what it means. And next time that person and me and that person is talking about video games, there's nothing to lie about, and the person is excited and goes into a high pitch, immediately my brain will go, okay, excited, high pitch. And one of the capabilities I've developed is I can go back in time, pull back all the archives of when they've been excited in high pitch, and immediately conclude they were excited at that moment. But let's say someone lies to me. And again, their voice, let's say there was a flutter of, like a blood flow that was cut, like, you know, when a minor thing that I can hear was, I don't know what that means. Even if I've had 100 other people for whom it means that they're lying, when I hear that person do that minor thing, I don't know what it means. Remember, calibration and assumption both start with observation. And the most dangerous assumptions are those that are based on very precise observation. Oh, she didn't look at me, so she doesn't like me. Oh, he didn't talk to me today, so he must hate me. Okay, now the first part is accurate. Didn't look at me, didn't talk to me, didn't look at the eye. The second part is an assumption. He looked into my eyes while we were talking, so he's telling the truth. First part accurate, second part assumption. They both, assumption and calibration, both have precise observation as the first step. So when someone talks to me in a particular way that is unusual than their regular self, it is stored forever in my head. Their tonal patterns are stored. But I don't know what that means. But next time, let's say 2 years later, we are at a traffic signal and the police is asking something and that person is lying to the police. I have a reference of the tonal pattern. And then my head can scan through all the 2 years ago, catch that tonal pattern and recognize, oh, this person, when he said that particular thing, actually lied to me. Okay, so when I developed my capability to hear sounds, I didn't know this is the extent to which I can push my boundaries. I didn't know in addition to that, it'll make me more artistic. I didn't know in addition to that, it can enable me to have hypnotic patterns in my voice. So the reason I call them as fundamental capabilities is because it opens up doors to so many other capabilities.
We never like to complete our video without giving you the opportunity to personally evolve and launch your legacy. Imagine for a moment, what would it feel like when you are impacting the world positively so much and enhancing your business, your health, your family and legacy. All of this together simultaneously, continuing to grow leaps and bounds, fast and smoothly. If you've got the right motives, we believe Antano and Harini will be able to help you launch your legacy in compressed time. Get excellence installation-based personal evolution and keep making a difference, starting with yourself.
Unless a person goes through this experience of meeting Antano and Harini and going through the 6 days, I don't know how to explain that, but you want all your loved ones or whom you care for to go through this experience yourself because you know what it has done for you.
This is the best gift I can give to my children to excel in life, and I cannot give any best gift other than this.
The brain has this wonderful ability to take something you do again and again and build specialized circuitry for them. Which means after some time of doing it, it becomes automatic and natural.